Some of the most amazing epic stories in all of history are found in the Bible. And over the years, many have tried to adapt these stories into comic book form. But too often, these comics, honestly, they're just disappointing. Today, I'm joined by two of the creative minds behind a new series that are seeking to change all of that. This is Tatooine Sons.
It's true. All of it.
What is the name of the Porg on the Millennium Falcon?
Force is strong in my family.
What do you think his name is? It's a big moment.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Maybe Turbis?
Do or do not. There is no try.
Turbis? Pablo, if you're listening to this live stream, that Porg's name is now Turbis. It's a good Star Wars name.
We're not done yet.
These guys recorded an awesome podcast called Tatooine Sons. Everybody listen to that.
Welcome to Tatooine Sons, the only fan podcast to name an official Star Wars creature and to be endorsed by the writer-director of The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson. We believe that pop culture is the mythology of this generation, that there is a story. It is written on our souls, and that these myths speak to that story. And that is why I'm honored to be joined this week by the creators behind a new comic book series called Chronicles of Faith. Chronicles of Faith is a collaboration between Mercyways Studios and Brainy Pixel. And I think it has the potential to reinvent the Christian comic books genre. Iván Anaya is a comic book artist whose work experience includes companies like Image Comics, Dynamite Comics, DC Comics, among others. He's also made independent comics in Argentina, Brazil, and El Salvador. He was the conceptual and narrative artist at Stonebot Studios in the video game area. And now at Mercyways Studios, he's the art director and a lead comic artist and writer. He's the creator of the series Fear Not, which won the Best Children's Biblical Project in Germany in 2017. And now, like I said, he leads Mercyways Studios and that team to create Chronicles of Faith. And then joining me and Iván is Brannon Hollingsworth of Brainy Pixel. He's an author, speaker, poet, producer, publisher, game designer, content creator, scriptwriter, art director, and unapologetic Christ follower. Brannon is the author or co-author of over a dozen novels, novellas, and short stories, and the co-creator of a game that Forbes called A Clever Idea Well Executed and Excellent. All right, so these guys came together to put together this new Chronicles of Faith comic book series. And like I said at the opening, Christian comics can be a lot like Christian movies. There are a lot of them made, but most aren't very good. I asked Iván and Brannon, what makes the Chronicles of Faith different?
One of the things that we want to do is we want to make everyone know the story of David. I mean, if you go to a game and you see the big team against the small one, it's just David versus Goliath. It's just a pop reference right now. Mm-hmm. And everyone knows that story. And what we're trying to do with Chronicles of Faith, David, is we want to make a fresh approach to this story. You're going to find what you know about this story, but this story actually can surprise you about how he's telling and what is the reason to be who is telling the story to you. And one of the things that we want to make also impactful is how the art work. One of the things, like you just said, the Christian comics has been there for centuries. And I think it's amazing because there's a great medium to share the gospel. But for some reason, we actually put the message over the art. And it's great. I understand that. But for some reason, the church just give up to art. It just doesn't care. But no, God is a God of creation. He's creative God. So we want to put really emphasis in art. We one of the things we want to do is to create a compelling character that actually is good looking, appealing. Because in the time we're living, you cannot make something that doesn't look good, because there's a lot of visual, it's just distraction everywhere. Everything looks good in a phone, in a tablet. So one of the things we want to do is that. And Brannon can actually say that actually we want to create this in two language, from working to something different.
Yeah. So Iván's spot on. Everything he's saying, I agree with 100%. And one of the big, guiding principles with both of these studios, Brainy Pixel and Mercyways, is that we consider everything that we work on first and foremost as an offering to our amazing creative God. And you can read in Genesis and see how poorly it turns out when you bring a poor offering to God, right? I mean, that's the underlying message of Cain and Abel, and it wound up with the first murder, and so that's not a good way to go. So we want to bring our absolute best to God. We don't want to bring our second best. We don't want to bring our second fruits. We want to bring our first fruits. And also there's a very clear call, I think, within the Christian creative community that we need to take back the arts. We need to take back entertainment. We need to take back science. In the Renaissance, the church was at the absolute height of the entire world with sculpture and with art and with science. And for some reason, we've just kind of co-opted that. And I think there's a very clear call that we need to take it back. And so we're starting with this little comic and everything that we do, trying to take back that ground that the enemy has taken and spoiled, in my opinion.
That's good. Yeah. Issue 0 starts off with a very well-known story. It's kind of like jumps right in to David and Goliath. But right after that, it kind of reaches the climax of the story. Everything shifts to what we learn is the real setting of the series, which is an older King David sharing stories of his life with his young son, Solomon. Why did you choose to present the series this way?
Well, actually, this is a team collaboration, and we were speaking with Ernesto, who is my partner, business partner, CEO partner in Mercyways, and actually he was telling what, something that will be awesome is just someone is telling this story. It's just someone who actually telling everything that happened, because we already know about David. Yeah, he was telling, I know this from, church school and stuff like that. And one of the things that actually hit us we were praying and we were actually reading the Bible for doing this. And there's a verse in Deuteronomy who said, dude, tell this story to your kids in the morning and the night. And David was always someone who actually trying to keep all the what the Lord wants from him. Mm-hmm. He made mistakes like everybody else, but we remember it was just, why is not all David telling this story? Why is not David accomplish what is said in Deuteronomy and telling this to the new king, to actually someone who's going to be important in making the foundation to the new king? And we start dreaming when we think about it. It's just a father telling this to a son before sleeping. This is gonna be amazing. It's just, and then we're trying to say, you know what? This is to telling the story for the same reason, to recovering something that God actually tell us to do, and just put it in the format when you can replicate that. And the other stuff is the Book of Chronicles. There's a funny story why this is called Chronicles of Faith, because if you go to the chronological order of the books, the Book of Chronicles is still the last book written, and it was written to remember everything that happened before. It's just, people, we've been living in Babylon for so many time, we just forget to trust in our God. You know what? We're going to retell this story. And if you think that already we live in Babylon and we forget what God has done, And why don't we just not grab the spirit or what the Book of Chronicles is made and just put it in a comic? Everyone loves comics right now. Everyone have comic in I don't know, 50 years ago, only a niche kind of people used to know what comics was. And now everyone knows. So this is the time to do this, to bring comics to everyone. So this is it's just some part of the stories that we just like, you know what, let's keep in this idea. And it turned out to be a great idea, thank God. And it's just a shift in the story. It's just trying to tell you, you know what, you don't know what is going to happen after this.
Yeah, and I think that's the brilliance, really, of the Mercy Ways team. And Brainy Pixel cannot claim any of that. That was already done and set by the time we got involved in the project. But, you know, the challenge with telling a story like David is it's a two-edged sword, right? Number one, everybody knows the story. But then the problem is everybody knows the story. And so you got to approach it somehow with a fresh hook or a fresh look. And I think it is the fact that, sorry?
Why know both? Fresh look and
and or both, yes, absolutely. And so I think that the real brilliance of this comic is the fact that we are echoing scripture, but we're also presenting it in a way that it's never been done before. And there's also a really powerful challenge that's kind of wrapped up in that our prayer is that you're reading a comic about a father telling a story to a son. Yeah. And we pray that other fathers and mothers will now use this as a device to tell this story to their children. You know, we need to propagate this message forward. We need to establish this as, you know, a bedtime routine or, you know, an afternoon fun time routine. And so we really feel like utilizing that as part of the story itself is a really clever way to kind of capture that interest. And there's a bigger kind of plan in place here with the Chronicles of Faith, that we do want to tell these stories of the Chronicles of Faith, and not just David, but other, you know, amazing people in the faith within the Bible, you know, Ruth and Boaz and, you know, Solomon and Joshua and, you know, all these people that were amazing examples of what it was like to step out on faith for God. But then also, even beyond that, we could go extra biblical and we could tell stories about Lottie Moon or Martin Luther King or Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I mean, there's really no end to what we could do with the Chronicles of the Faith series. And if the Lord wills, we want to follow in that direction. So we're really excited about the concept of the series. And of course, these books are, you know, just near and dear to our heart.
That's good. You know, one thing that really pulls me into this story is my own personal connection with this ancient story. My obviously first name's David.
Right.
My last name is Jesse.
Right.
I was named that intentionally. So I was David, the son of Jesse. My middle name is Samuel. I was named my middle name after my grandfather, but also after the prophet that anointed David. My sons are named Samuel and Nathan after the prophets that were the most important prophets in King David's life.
You're going to love issue 1.
I do. I love everything about it so far, what I've seen. One of the most important locations I've actually had the opportunity to visit 4 different times, I've actually got to stand in the Valley of Elah in Israel. Wow. And so as I was looking at the illustrations and opening that very first page of episode 0 or issue 0, right, I was really just fascinated with how accurate the illustrations were to what I saw in that valley. You know, the first time I visited there in 2008 and every time since. How are you guys? So that leads me to this understanding from what I can tell so far in the stories, that you guys are being very, very careful about being accurate, not just with the way that the illustrations are, which I mentioned, but also the biblical story with it. That's really important. How are you balancing the importance of telling a story in this type of a medium? You know, comic books, it's got to be shorter, it's got to be fast, it's got to be visual, while remaining true to that biblical narrative.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of the things that. Oh, go ahead, Brannon. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say again, hats off to Mercy Ways, right? Because again, this is kind of originally their conception, and really it's their process that was one of the things that intrigued Brainy Pixel to the point where we're like, hey, we want in. We want to be involved in this, and we're putting money on the table to make this thing happen. These guys and gals in El Salvador, they, number one, are just, they love the Lord. They love the things of God, the Word of God, and they continually seek the Spirit and the face of God. And this project has been bathed in hours and hours and hours of prayer, first and foremost. Secondly, tons of study. I mean, I have actually learned so much about this story. And I've been in the church almost my whole life. I'm a deacon. I'm a teacher of youth and of college age kids, but I have learned a ton as a part of this process, because it's not just making comics at Mercy Ways. It's Bible study time. It's research time. And then maybe we'll get to start talking about comics and characters. So these guys, we have done thorough, Bible studies, all the books that touch David, both Old and New Testament. We have jumped into the Talmud. We have read Josephus. We have read the historical references. Iván is a stickler for historical accuracy. I mean, designing the armor of the Philistines, it's a whole process. It's not, we're just going to make some stuff that looks cool. We're going to reach back into history, pull out what's real, and then we're going to see if we can iterate on that without taking away from the reality, but kind of heightening the comicness of it. So it's an entire process that these guys and gals have created, and it's stunning to be a part of and humbling to be a part of. For me as a storyteller, both visually and with words, I can't think of a better partner to make this happen than Mercy Ways. They're just amazing.
Well, thank you, Brannon. I don't know what else to say about after that, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to recreate accuracy in the story, because we respect the Bible so much. But we also understand that the Bible is just not. You cannot find everything about David in there. We just go to the Talmud, we go to Josephus, we learn so much about David. Like there's one story that we always brings up. It's just, there's a reading in the Talmud how David was not just like a political king. He was a people person. And he had the role to teach in the Torah, but every time he teach the Torah, he just take off his royal costumes and just sit on the floor in with the people and just start to talking to the people. He was walking in his barely shoes in the palace. And that sounds so much like Jesus that it's just like, wow. He's just like, you can see Jesus in there. And just like, why, one of the things that blow my mind is why David cannot kill Saul. And actually there was some, in Deuteronomy, there's no one can touch the king who God has anointed. Mm-hmm. And David, he was a man who has the law of God in his mind, that he was just trying not to cross the line to do whatever he wanted, even that he was the rightful king. Mm-hmm. So we were building the character of David. We just like trying to generate a circle of how David was. The Bible first, and then the second other books to actually fill the gaps about that. It's just like what kinds of bear was in that area first. What kind of lion was there? What kind of trees you can find in that place? Mm-hmm. And all that kind of stuff. What season was when David was fighting Goliath? Because if he put the hand in the river, it means there was a spring because it was raining, because that place is just dry the most mm-hmm. time of the year. So that means it has to be green. Well, is the question that you ask how that look like. And you say like, why we choose to that time of the year? Because everything looked green, everything looks, because it was a spring. It was the time when the rain is falling and the river has water on it. That all that kind of stuff is just our process of creation. It's just like, wait, why? Why is just doing that? And this is bring back because I worked a couple of years for video games, and everything in video game is just why. Why are you going to do that? And why this is going to happen to? And I bring that to comics, and I bring that to Mercy Ways. So what we're trying to do that. Also, I don't know how to say it, it's just it's a comic too. We're just trying to do that. Okay, but this is a comic, and we're going to use the language of comics. So over exaggerate something, or maybe when we were deciding how David's hair is going to be, because one is blonde and the other is brown and the other is red. Okay, we're going to grab a middle. It's just going to be light brown, almost red, and he has special eyes. Okay, what color is special in Israel? And it's the color green. So why we'll be deciding that kind of stuff.
Last week, I was at a conference in Orlando. I was speaking with a white pastor from Charlotte and a Haitian pastor who now lives in Brooklyn, New York. These pastors were discussing a church they both know well in Brooklyn, made up of Jamaican immigrants. The white pastor mentioned that attending a service at this church was one of the most amazing experiences of his life. And he then remarked that this was the first time that he'd ever seen a depiction of a black Jesus. The Haitian pastor we were speaking with replied that this really is an important idea to these Jamaican Christians because it allows them to experience Jesus more closely and relate to him more intensely. I couldn't help but think about that when discussing the choices Iván and Brannon are having to make in this Chronicles of Faith series. While they're committed to accuracy in the biblical story that they're telling, they're also taking some liberties to allow for the story to fit the context that they're telling it in. My interview with Iván and Brannon will continue in just a moment, but I want to take just a minute to thank our sponsors, Cufflinks.com. If you're not familiar with Cufflinks.com, all you need to know is that they have over 3,000 items on their website, including cufflinks, ties, tie bars, and socks from all of the fandoms that you love, like Star Wars, Star Trek, Marvel, DC, Lord of the Rings, and more. We love Cufflinks.com because they're family-owned. They're run by a couple of brothers who love Star Wars and all of these fandoms as much as we do. And so if you want to help the show out and you want to look great doing it, head on over to Cufflinks.com, take a look at everything they have to offer on that website. And then when you get to the checkout, make sure that you use the code Tatooine15, because if you do, you're going to receive 15% off of your entire order. So you get to help yourself out, you get to buy some amazing things, save money on it, and help the show out at the same time. All right, earlier in our conversation, I mentioned to Iván and Brannon the importance of the Valley of Elah to me personally. I took both Sam and Nathan there when they were 13 years old for a special time. And each of them picked up a stone from the creek bed that David would have used to gather stones to defeat Goliath, as kind of a reminder or a memento of their time in Israel and what that time meant to them. In issue 1 of Chronicles of Faith, King David begins to explain the importance of these types of mementos to his son Solomon as a way of reminding us of what God has done in our lives. So I asked Iván and Brannon why they decided to bring this idea into the story.
Wow. After that, actually, I can see the God of working in here, because actually that was an idea. The issue 1 is completely different from issue 1 is issue 0. In issue 1, Brannon and I was talking about that. So most of the idea is back to back. It's just he named it Mementos. Actually, we were speaking about why it's going to be 12 stone, and actually it's for the same reason in Deuteronomy. Because sometimes we need just stuff that remind us what God has done, and not idols. We're not talking about idols. We're not talking about this is the promise of God. No, this is just like something to remind you the goodness and the character of God. And that what happened in the story in Joshua. Joshua actually put 12 stone, one in front of another. And he reminded 12 tribes that actually happened. But also, there's 12 stone under the river Jordan. That actually, I think, and that is some personal interpretation, that was something to remind the next generation that there is where the Jordan happens. And actually, it was just a secret memento for Joshua that, you know what, I step on the dry land of the Jordan and I be able to do this. And I know what God does. So we were thinking that in the mind of David, that is just like the normal story that we heard. It's just, you remember what Samson did? He just killed a lion with their bare hands. It's just, everyone has just had that stories in their mind. And if you go to the Jewish people, they teach that story every night and every day. And we try to put that in issue 0, like my father tell this story to us. It's just David replicating what Jesse was doing. So one way we're trying to do is just after that, God gave so many victories to David, and David grabbed one memento for each victory, and they became the room of mementos that you're going to see in the issue. But this was the principal story, the idea, and Brannon actually helped with that idea. So go ahead, my brother.
Yeah. So Iván, again, spot on, and we have to understand that the time in which we're talking about, the Old Testament. I know it's shocking maybe for some of your listeners, David, but TVs didn't exist then. The internet didn't exist then. And I'm pretty sure that when the sun went down and you had lots of hours of darkness and not a lot of things to do, you told stories. And the people of Israel told the stories about the amazing things that God had done. Iván and I often joke that, God had the original cinematic universe, not Marvel. And so part of it is that it's echoing these amazing stories, and having something tangible to tie back to those stories is really important. And I think this also works on another level, and that's the level of fathers to sons or fathers to children. It is so critical that especially godly fathers, that they do exactly what you did, David, and they create essentially a very specific and very particular moment in their children's lives where they pass from childhood into adulthood. This concept of tweens and teenagers and, 30-year-old kids doesn't exist in the Bible. In the Bible, you were either a child or you were a man. You were an adult or you were a kid. That was it. And one of the things I believe our culture has failed at miserably is creating this moment, right, where you pass from childhood into adulthood. And these things, these mantles of adulthood are placed on you. And you might not be fully ready for them yet, but that's why you have a father. And that's why we have a heavenly father that we can rely on. I do something very similar in my family. All of my kids are homeschooled except for my eldest. And so I take my kids on an adventure when they're 13. I take them on an adventure that I tailor to their likes, their passions, what they're interested in. And I just spend, 2 or 3 days in a different place than they've ever been, doing different things than they've ever done, eating different foods than they've ever tried, and letting them know that the world is way bigger, maybe than what's outside your front door, and that God made all this and he wants you to explore it, and he's given us dominion over it, and he's enabled us to go and be good stewards of it. And so I think part of that is wrapped up in this memento. It's wrapped up in this story of a father to a son. And it's something that I pray that Christian men out there co-opt. I invite them to steal it, take this concept and use it in their families. Your sons need it desperately, and your daughters need it really bad in terms of the men they're going to one day marry. And so there are so many things that are wrapped up in this, and I get really passionate about it, but it's very important. And we see it in the Bible over and over again, a father passing a blessing to a son. And we need to bring that back. It's definitely worth it.
One of the things that we want to create is the idea you can build your own story with God. You can create your chronicles with faith with God. one of the line for our comic is we want to inspire you to trust in God, like David did, like David was teaching to Solomon. One of the principle in issue 1 is just, he said, this story is not about me. This story is about God. Mm-hmm. And we want to understand that you can build your own Chronicles of Faith. And you're going to call it the same way, David, because you call David, but you can have the Chronicles of Faith, David. But everyone can build your own Chronicles of Faith. And we want, that is inside the art, inside the story, inside it, we want you to create your own chronicles and your own walk with God. And in the middle of a battle, you can close your eyes and pray to God. And you can do that. And we trying to teach that for David, it was just one prayer away. Praying is something essential in this book. And we're trying to put a visual on it because we want you to actually do it. That page just strikes you, but we want you to strike you in the moment that we want you to pray and reach to God like David does.
Amen.
It's very exciting. What the storytelling in what I've seen so far has been really well done. It grabs the attention. It keeps the attention. It doesn't come across as sort of Sunday school flannel graph, storytelling with that. And visually, it's gorgeous. Every element, that the confrontation with the bear and everything, and then the way you guys wove in. Obviously the parable of the lost sheep into that story, the one sheep, and how, you could almost see that story being told from generation to generation to generation to generation until Jesus heard it as a little boy. And he used that as a parable to teach his disciples and to teach us. It's beautiful the way that you did it with that. I can't wait to see what's going to come in the future of this. So I'm going to ask for it. Give us a preview. What can we expect to see or tease what's going to happen in the Chronicles of Faith going forward?
Oh, wow. Well, this is going to be the first volume of Chronicles of Faith that is going to have issue 0, issue 1, issue 2, issue 3, and issue 4. The first volume is going to go from shepherd to hero. We're going to close with the fight of Goliath. It's not a spoiler here because everyone knows that. But what we're going to do with this is trying to teach what's happened in the other side of the story, the Philistine side, and what happened in the spiritual realm. Because you cannot say that battle was not Israel versus Philistine. It was Yahweh versus Dagon. And we bring that stories because that happened before, happened with Samuel, where the ark was lost. It's just a hint of something that you're going to see. But what we're trying to do is just how David defeat that, how he get there. There's going to be one more issue that is now going to be, for some reason, to say biblical, because like issue 0 is not going to be in the Bible, but it's going to be echo something that happened in the Bible. Issue 1 is you're going to discover the King Saul, how the King Saul looks. You're going to see the other side of the fight. And you're going to start to building, and trying to create something that you want to see what is going to happen between Goliath and David. And you know what's going to happen, but you don't know what is going to happen. And the next issue 2, the issue initially we're trying to look to start working soon, is going to be, it's called Brave and Humble. And have you ever wondered how one of the servant and Saul know that David was a good man who he know how to play the harp, and he's a man of battle? Well, we're going to tell that story. because the Bible did not tell. It's just some random. I know a guy from Bethlehem who actually know how to play the harp, and that's okay. That's awesome. But how that happened? And issue 2, not issue 1, issue 2 is going to tell that story. We're going to see that. Is one of the issues that I really, because we're trying to put an echo of the gospel in there, of how mercy is going to be involved. But this is issue 2, and is what happened after David was well, I'm not going to spoil it.
I think another thing that's really interesting about issue 2 is we see the beginning of the fall of Saul, right? Yeah. The very first tinges of that. And so, that's part of David's story. It's inexorably linked to David's story and to the story of Jonathan and the story of their kids. And so you can't really tell the story of David without telling the story of Saul. And so we begin to bring that in and fold that story in, the story of Samuel as well. So all these stories begin layering, not in a cluttered way, we pray, but in a way that, again, continues to point directly to the point, which is the story of David. So, we're really very excited about it.
So it's obvious that the future of this series is really dependent on being able to raise the funds in order to produce these series with it. So tell us how listeners can get involved in helping you tell these stories.
So yeah, absolutely. So again, the issues 0 and issue 1, they're done. They're in the can. They're all produced. But comics cost a lot of money, especially at the level of production that we're trying to achieve, again, for the glory of God. And so we're doing an experiment actually with issue 2, and we're opening it up as an Indiegogo. And our prayer is that like-minded Christians who want to see this amazing content will vote with their dollar and put their money where their faith is and come and help support us. If they're able to do that, then we'll absolutely be able to produce issue 2 and maybe beyond, depending on the success of the fundraise. But we have no doubt that even if the Indiegogo falls flat, which we don't think it will, but if it happens to, God will provide the means to continue this story. Yeah. The Kendrick brothers, who in the States are really famous for making Christian films, I was at a conference with them not too long ago, and Stephen Kendrick, he said, when a similar question was asked, he said, what? If it's God's will, it's God's bill. And so he will bring the funds if he's in it. And so we're not concerned, with raising this money, but we also want to try and build a fan base of people who are passionate about these stories. They're passionate about gospel-centered stories because, again, we're in this for the long haul. We could see Chronicles of Faith having a run that extends, until the point where Iván and I, are in an old folks home somewhere together, So we pray that folks can come along and join us as a part of that journey, and we invite people to do so.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we want to actually just give it a try, come and see. It's just is because we're trying to actually give something different. David is just a famous hero. Everyone knows that story, and like we were told before, we're trying to help you to know better. So you can help us to create this issue 2. Is going to be amazing. And we're trying to, and also, if you help us, you're going to have the opportunity to read issue 0 and issue 1. So it's part of the perks in there. And issue 1 is not as small as issue 2. It's a 34 color pages. So it's bigger, it's better, it's epic in so many ways. And if you want to know more about the story of David, just please go ahead. If you ever wonder why God chose David over Saul, we try to answer that question in issue 1.
I want to personally let you know how excited that we are here at Tatooine Sons about this project, this Chronicles of Faith project. you need to understand these illustrations in the 2 issues that we've had a chance to read are absolutely some of the best comic book illustrations I've ever seen. They're stunning. The story is compelling. It's biblically accurate. And each issue, when I finished reading it, made me want to continue to keep the story going. This is a project worth getting behind. Chronicles of Faith has a real opportunity to do something powerful in the comic book genre. And we've never linked to a fundraiser like this on an episode before. But this week, we want to ask you to check out their Indiegogo page. The link is in the show description. Check it out and consider supporting this project. And again, I want to thank Iván and Brannon for joining me this week. Please, in addition to checking out their Indiegogo, check out what they're doing over at brainypixel.com and mercyways.com so you can learn about all of the other projects that these studios are working on. And thank you so much for listening to Tatooine Sons, a pop culture podcast. If you enjoyed this interview, will you please take a moment to rate and review the show on your podcast app of choice? Follow the show or subscribe to the show on the app that you're listening to it on so you get every episode the moment it drops. Our next episode releases on Tuesday. We're going to be talking about that cornucopia of Star Wars heroes and villains that appeared in Chapter 6 of The Mandalorian. That was a lot. We're going to be reviewing Season 2, Episode 4, Superman and Lois, and this whole weird Bizarro thing that's going on, and that crazy cult. Anyway, that's some nuts stuff there. And then I think we're going to give some background on the story leading up to the Batman releasing into theaters on March 4th. So there's things there that you're going to hear that you haven't heard probably anywhere else. So I'm excited to share that with you. Make sure you follow the show on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss it. While you're at it, follow Tatooine Sons on Facebook and Twitter. Share this episode with somebody else. It is the way that you can help this show grow. Thank you so much for doing that. That's going to do it for this episode. There's, again, only one thing left to say.
May the force be with you always.
This party's over.
I like that Wookiee.
Don't get technical with me.
Join, please.
Yep, yep.